Today, Great.com talks with Cody Wisniewski, who is director of the Center to Keep and Bear Arms at Mountain States Legal Foundation. If you haven't heard of them, they are a non-profit organization on a mission to help you protect your liberty. If you're new here, please press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because today we learn the benefits of fighting for the right to own and use property, limited and ethical government, and the free enterprise system. Hello, Cody, and welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much, Cody. And just as I mentioned, I'm really looking forward to this episode to learn a bit more about you and what you guys do there. So to start with, Cody, for me and anybody new here today, what is MS Legal and what do you do?
Absolutely. So Mountain States Legal Foundation is a nonprofit legal foundation located in the United States. We were founded in 1977 to fight for constitutionally protected freedoms. So we fight for property rights, right to own, right to use. We do a lot of work with ranchers and farmers in the United States, fighting for the ability to use their land and to maintain their livelihoods. And as you mentioned, I run the Center to Keep and Bear Arms. So my primary focus is fighting for people's right to self-defense.
Wow. I mean, wow, that just sounds to me just like it's like a big thing to have, over your head, right? To allow people the rights or to fight for people's rights to bear arms and protect their property. So I would like to ask you then, Cody, why would you say what you do is so important?
I think the key is maintaining our constitutional form of government, or at least returning our government to a constitutional form so that people can exercise their rights and live their lives as they see fit. I mean, our biggest goal at Mountain States is to return ourselves to the founding principles of the United States and to go back to what our founders and framers intended. And in that system, people are able to thrive. People are able to own and use their property as they see fit. People are able to protect their lives, protect their loved ones as they see fit. And these are all really important things for individuals to be able to do in order to live a quality life, as well as for our country to run smoothly.
Yeah, and I'm just like thinking now, just from say an outsider's point of view, that's only just got to learn a little bit about what you guys do. So for anybody say that's listening today, they may hear the word to use their arms or to protect themselves or their property. So for anybody say almost because obviously for a lot of people that's listening in, they're thinking, oh my God, that sounds dangerous, or why would you want to be able to use that? So in what incidents would say an individual need to use their arms?
There are multiple instances where, people need to be able to protect themselves. I mean, we live in a scary world today. There are certainly people out there that are looking to hurt other people and to take things from them. And so having the ability to protect yourself is really key. I mean, there are instances where there are, burglaries, armed robberies. There are people being held up at gunpoint. We live in a world where at times people are unhinged and are using arms and going out in public trying to harm people. And it's very important for individuals to have that right and the ability to protect their own lives when, somebody else can't always do that for them, and to be able to protect the lives of their loved ones. I mean, that is so important in our system and in our country and in our world, that people have the ability to truly defend their own lives.
I mean, it's a topic or a conversation that I'm sure many people would have different opinions, right, on bearing arms or using, say, let's say a gun, for instance, to protect themselves or their property. So I'm sure many people, and I'm sure you've been, say, challenged with this question before, I'm sure many people that's listening as well would think or say, like almost like two wrongs don't make a right sort of thing. And obviously when you're in that situation, potentially life-threatening situation, I mean, most of us, I'm sure all of us, would do anything they need to do to say protect themselves or their loved ones. But then I've heard, for instance, especially say in the US, where many people say like, oh, there's too many guns, for instance, or there's so many guns that people aren't using them correctly. So could you tell us a little bit more about that, Cody?
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. Once you get into that situation of a truly life-threatening scenario, is you have that right to defend your life. And we're not advocating for every single person in the United States to own a firearm and to have a firearm on their own. That is up to you. That is up to the people in this country, whether or not they want to exercise that right or not. But the fact of the matter is, people who possess and carry firearms lawfully and legally are some of the most peaceable citizens in the United States. Concealed carry holders in the United States are overwhelmingly some of the most law-abiding citizens in the US. There are, I mean, millions of firearms in the United States today that are just sitting in people's homes and in gun cabinets, just there in case people need them for defense, and are used for many other purposes as well. And so I can certainly understand why in today's environment, especially when we talk about guns like we do, or at least some sources talk about guns like they do, that people get a little bit nervous. But I think that if we remember the purpose of those tools and recognize that they really are just tools to effectuate, whether it be defense or sporting purposes or hunting or something like that, I think it helps frame the conversation. And I think people just really need to realize a little bit too, that there are a lot of people from different walks of life. Just because, you know, somebody living in a high rise in San Francisco might be uncomfortable personally with the idea of having an arm in their apartment or in their loft or in their condo, it doesn't mean that they need to be advocating for people that live in rural areas where they don't have other options to be able to defend their own lives. And so I think it's really important that we understand why people are coming about this. And we also recognize that the presence of firearms isn't the dangerous part. The United States is a country that's had firearms, I mean, pervasive individual ownership of firearms since before we were a country. I mean, well before 1776, there was pervasive individual ownership, and you don't really see public use of those firearms in a dangerous way. You don't see this threatening elements that we're starting to see a little bit more today. And so it's really not the firearms. Oftentimes we want to have this conversation about guns, and instead maybe the conversation should be focused on why are they being used in a way today that they weren't used in a way 100 years ago.
Very, very interesting. So I've got two questions actually now, Cody. A few things that you mentioned there. So I want to go on to in a moment about, say, the education of, say, the individuals that, say, potentially could have a firearm, because surely they need educating around, say, owning or possessing a gun. But just before that, I want to ask you, and I'm sure you've been, say, challenged or asked this question before as well many times. I'm sure many people that, say, would maybe listen to this as well would argue that if the individual, say, has access to a gun, whether it's possession or, say, sat in a cabinet at home, etc., that would then make it so much easier to, say, misuse that tool or say commit an offence with that, say, with a gun, say, for instance. So I'm sure many people would say it's best not to have it rather than to have it there just in case they did get, say, robbed or attacked or broken into their house, etc. But yeah, I'm sure many people would argue because that gun is there, they may go on to then use it in the wrong way.
Some people may. And there are plenty of different tools. There are plenty of different implements. There are plenty of different things that we have in our daily lives that people misuse. You know, people in Minnesota, we saw somebody drive a car into a parade of people. I mean, vehicles are immensely dangerous and can be used to inflict an immense amount of pain. We've seen people, in the UK, we've seen people go on attacks with knives. You've seen that in countries across the world that don't have access to guns as well. What it is it's not that implement, right? There's something else happening. There's something going on where some people are, and it's the individual, right? It's not the tool. We don't want to look at the car in Minnesota. We don't want to look at the knife in the UK. We don't want to look at those things. We don't want to look at the pressure cooker that people use for impromptu bombings. We need to look at the individuals that are perpetuating those acts. But the key is that the vast majority of firearms owners in the US, and I'm not exaggerating when I say there are millions of firearms in the US, the vast, vast, vast majority of those people are peaceable, everyday people. They're your neighbors, they're your friends, they're your coworkers, they're, guys that you just walk past on the street. They're, single moms who are defending themselves when they go to the grocery store after work at night. They're people in inner city neighborhoods that live in a really dangerous place that need the ability to protect themselves because police might not respond at all or quickly in some of those really dangerous neighborhoods as well. And so it's really kind of a privileged position for people to feel as though they can just rely on somebody else to protect their life, right? That's really something that's unique in a very comfortable living in certain places in certain countries. But there are plenty of places where we recognize that people need to rely on their own ability to defend themselves. And so, yes, implements can be used in dangerous ways, but everything can be used in a dangerous way. And stopping people from the effective means of protecting their own lives or their loved ones or their communities or their neighborhoods or their churches, that's not the right answer. The answer isn't to stop people from protecting their lives because there's some bad apples. The answer is to empower people to protect their lives, their loved ones, and their property, and then to also address bad apples as the individuals they are, the people that are perpetuating these acts as they are.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so important. Like you mentioned there, it is the individual rather than say the object or the tool, as to say, because you mentioned, say, it could be a knife, it could be a car. Like a car, everybody drives, or most people drive cars.
Yeah.
And you could cause so much damage with just a car. Like, it's crazy. You could use, say, a kitchen knife, right? And you could say murder somebody with a knife. So it is definitely the individual. So actually, before I go on to the next question, I'd like to know, is there, say, any sort of vetting process or any, say, certification that somebody, say an individual may need to gain before actually being able to own a gun or possess a gun?
So contrary to somewhat popular belief these days, it seems like the United States does have background checks. So there's a federal background check system that requires people to ensure that they, meet certain criteria. Some of those criteria have expanded beyond reason, and the system certainly isn't perfect. What is key is, and we've seen this in the US from our founding, is that we've always understood that it's okay to prohibit known dangerous people from possessing firearms. So a lot of what we do at Mountain States and what I do at the Center to Keep and Bear Arms is we look at the Constitution, we look at the amendments to the Constitution in the light that they were understood when they were debated and passed and ratified. And so we look to that history to inform our interpretation so that we're not just making these things up out of thin air. We're looking to see where they were grounded and why they were the foundation of our country. And one thing, if you look to the history, is clear, is that it was understood that you could prohibit known dangerous people. So prior to the US being founded, there were instances of people who had, engaged in active rebellion. And those people could be prohibited from possessing arms. In our early history, there were a couple rebellions, the Shays Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion, which happened in the Northeast. And after those instances, those people that participated in those rebellions were prohibited from possessing arms for a certain term of years because they were known to be dangerous. This isn't people that you think might potentially be harmful. This isn't giving the government the power to just unilaterally decide who gets to own arms and who doesn't. That's not the point, right? This is a right that is vested in you as a human being. But for known dangerous people that we know have a predilection to harm or will use those tools in a way to harm people, we understand that you can prohibit those. So there are certain points that we look to the history to inform on the right and how people can and should exercise it.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is a great point you made there, Cody. And like, just going back to a step before, like you said about the cars, and just say just a knife, for instance, like a kitchen knife, could inflict that same damage, or if not worse, than a gun as well. And you mentioned there about the known individuals that may, say, cause harm to others wouldn't be allowed to, say, own a gun. But then I'm sure just on the other side of, say, the debate would be, I'm sure that they don't get their driver's license taken away, and they could do the same damage, right? That's how I see it on the flip side to that as well.
Potentially, and it depends. So, right, we've got a very interesting system in the US where all 50 states have different laws surrounding what might affect that. And so, somebody that's known dangerous and is convicted of actually harming people, I mean, they're going to have everything taken away for a period of time while they spend their days in jail or in prison. And then once they come out, right, there's certain terms that they meet in order to reintegrate into society from their time in prison. And so there's a lot of problems with that system as well. Don't get me wrong, but those known dangerous people are not trusted in society to have, complete unfettered access or exercise of all of their rights. And that is pretty well established in our country from the beginning, was that, truly dangerous people in our society, we ensure that they can't continue to commit harm. Again, though, this is people that are actually known to be dangerous, not, thought of, not, we have process, we have due process in our country to ensure that people are held accountable for the things that they actually do, and not vice versa. So there are instances where they might not have access, but you're right. I mean, they might have access to a kitchen knife and go and perpetuate harm that way and hurt people that way. And, then again, they'll be held to account for that harm that they're committing.
No, 100%. And I just want to go back as well, like to what I mentioned earlier, and just to say, learn a little bit more about this, if you could sort of teach us. And could you sort of tell us a bit about, say, the education around owning a gun for the individual?
So, yeah, that also varies in our country, state by state. And it allows the people in that state to decide, where they're going to set lines on different issues. I think what's really important is as a gun owning community, as a group of people, that we take it upon ourselves to help educate others. And today, more than ever, you see training opportunities, you see people offering free help, you see programs that communities have set up to train people. There are people in rural areas that will take out new gun owners to go and shoot. There are people in inner cities that are bringing individuals to the range and teaching them basic gun safety. That is hugely important. There have been major advances in different tools to help people learn how to properly manipulate a firearm. There's, new rifles and stuff coming out all the time that are designed in order to be training aids. And so as a community, this is something that we've really taken on. And I think that that's really important. And it's something that empowers people to go to other people who do this every day, or have firearms in their lives every day, or have since they were little kids, and really bring them into into our community and help them along. And so that element is so important, and empowering those communities, empowering those people to help others and to step up and bring them into the fold is just so important. And it's been actually amazing to see, frankly. And in the US in the past 2 years, we've seen record numbers of firearm sales, just with all of the uncertainty, with violence going on, and with just all of this craziness as the world has been trying to figure out what life is going to be like. People started understanding that they might have to rely on themselves to protect themselves. But with those increased numbers, what we've also seen is the community really step up, and more of these programs came into place. I personally take it on myself. I take people to the range all the time, and try and help them learn if they're looking to buy a firearm. I encourage people to go and shoot, take a class if they're looking at buying their first gun, in order to be more comfortable with it and to understand that it is a tool. It is a dangerous tool, and it is something that you need to exert a very a great amount of care with. This isn't just something that you buy, you never shoot, you never train with, and you leave on your bedside table. That it's just frankly not a good idea. And so encouraging people to get out there and trying to kind of live that myself has been a major part of what we do and what the community does.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to give the individual that to teach them, really, because they need educating, because like you mentioned, if they own a gun, it's just going to sit there. It sounds a bit pointless just to do that. Like, they need educating on what this is, the reason is for having it, right? So just as we sort of wrap up here now, I'd just like to go over quickly, which you mentioned there, like what are, then, some of the biggest needs, or what is the biggest need of the individuals or communities that you support, and how are you a part of the solution?
So the biggest need that we're seeing is there's kind of this misinformation war. There's a lot of, we're seeing this in many different instances today where we can't talk, we can't have conversations about things. Us sitting down to chat. There are a million podcasts out there, but how many times do people really sit down and talk about some of these tougher issues? And so, it was wonderful being invited on to do this, just to have this conversation and to talk to your listeners about this. And I hope some people will come away and have, maybe at least think about it a little bit, even if they're not, their opinion isn't changed, or, they still are uncomfortable with the idea. At least they'll have some thought. And I think that's been a huge need of the community and what we've done as an organization. So we bring lawsuits against governments that infringe on people's rights. And so if a city or a state or the US federal government passes a law that stops people from being able to defend their lives and protect their lives, we'll represent those people in court, and we'll fight their cases all the way up to the Supreme Court if necessary, in order to ensure that they can exercise those rights. And so part of that is offering that legal service, and everything we do is pro bono. So our clients don't pay for legal fees. They, they are people that are representing a fight and are representing an issue. And legal fees can get wildly expensive, and attorneys are certainly not the cheapest to hire. So what we do pro bono is we represent them without charging them for that bill, so that they can exercise their rights. So doing that has been huge. And part of that is also that the education side, what we're talking about, and having these really sober conversations about gun rights, about self-defense, about the purpose of, the Second Amendment in the United States. And that is massive. And so I would really encourage people to go out. They can visit our website, mslegal.org. They can check out the center at mslegal.org/2A. They can see some of the work we're doing, but you can read all of the briefs we file, all of the op-eds that we write, but you can also take that a step further, and you can try and put yourself in somebody else's shoes and see, why somebody feels like they might need to take that responsibility on of defending their life or their loved ones or their families. A lot of gun owners, in the recent years, a lot of these new gun owners are single women who, live in dangerous neighborhoods, who, might not be able to fight off an attacker with a kitchen knife or with their hands and feet, might need that extra level of defense. And some of them are people in really dangerous inner city neighborhoods, and they need that ability to be able to protect themselves if law enforcement isn't going to be coming when they call. And so we want to empower everybody to make that decision for themselves, to be able to defend themselves. And I really encourage other people to think about it that way, and to think about the importance of the right in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot to take on there. So I'm sure many people can listen to what you just said there. And it's definitely, like, say, food for thought, like, because so many people are quick just to say no straight away, rather than, say, learning more about some of the things that you said there. Like, for instance, it could be, say, a young mother with, say, a young child, or two young children that's being attacked, and would, say, need to exercise her rights, which would be to use, say, a firearm. So no, there's definitely food for thought. So Cody, thank you for today. So sort of as we wrap this up now, what is your vision for the future?
That's a great question, Ryan. My vision for the future is I want to help return the US to a place where people are trusted and empowered to protect their lives, where people feel that comfort level and people recognize that that is something that is their right and something that they can do, and that we get to a place where we understand the importance of that.
Wow, that's brilliant. So for anyone, say, listening today, what can somebody do to, say, reach out to learn more about what you guys do? And yeah, what are some of the sort of action steps they can take to be a part of the solution?
So they can reach out to us at our website, www.mslegal.org. The center's at mslegal.org/2A. You can read about all of our work. All of our legal cases are public information. So you can read about our cases. You can, if you so choose, you can read the briefs that we file in courts and see exactly what we're saying and what we're arguing. We also take great effort to reach out to the community and write for different publications and write op-eds about issues to try and help people understand what's going on. So those are all great ways to get educated. If somebody wants to take this into their own hands, if they live in the United States, if they're not a gun owner, I would encourage them to look into the idea, to maybe go take a class to get comfortable with it, to start understanding why people think that that's important. There are so many classes available. There are so many different opportunities available for individuals. And the internet is as just as much as it's a scary place, it's also a wonderful place. There's so many resources available online for people to start learning about this right and about individuals' right to self-defense. So I'd encourage them to kind of visit us and use that as a jumping point. And, if people are inspired by what we do, we're also a nonprofit in the US. So we're funded entirely by individual donation. And so if people are inspired and want to participate in the fight that way, that's also an option available to them.
Thank you, Cody, so much for today. And it's been such an interesting conversation. So for you listening, if you've enjoyed this episode, please press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because that will show the algorithm that this is an important conversation, so more people can learn the importance of helping you protect your liberty.